This is the first masterclass that we are kicking off as part of the letter of engagement between Amazon and the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. There couldn't have been a better place to kick off the first masterclass than at FTII.
It had to be FTII if we had to formally go around the country and talk about the collaboration between the ministry and Amazon, which was signed sometime in the month of April by the Honorable Information Broadcasting Minister.
Although all our courses are fully focused and practical oriented, but still there might be a gap where what today's industry requires that we need to identify, and that we can get in association with Amazon. So I'm thankful to Ministry for including FTII in this LOE with Amazon.
Thank you so much for joining us. I will kick it off with you, if you don't mind.
Please.
Yeah, and in your process, in your journey, how do you identify a story? Right? How do you identify there is a story to be told in something that you observe, in something that you read, in something that you experience? And is there a particular effort or an intent in your school of filmmaking that you apply to make a story relatable? Is that a factor that you think about when you think about making a movie?
I mean, I think as you guys go along with the creative process, maybe you will agree partly or fully with what I have to say here. With me, this has been the experience. Sometimes a story chooses me. Sometimes I choose the story, In Chiller Party, the story chose me. Dangal, the story chose me. It came to me, and then I ended up writing it. But Chichore, it's a part of my experience in my campus at IIT Bombay. So I chose to write that story, But like you said, the reason why I want to tell a particular story, it is a gut call, It is something I don't think can be defined in words. There are no set rules. Sometimes there is a voice which comes from within you and say, you should be doing this. And I purely follow that voice. When I heard just one paragraph of Dangal, somebody pitched to me and my gut voice was like, let's go and find out more. This seems promising. So I purely go with my gut feel. Yeah.
Very interesting. All right, we're gonna talk more about your gut feeling. Thank you so much for that. Janhvi, my next question is to you. What is the process for you in getting into the character? Where does it start and what is your process like?
I think the excitement in it for me is to follow my director's lead. And I've noticed that each director has their own value system, belief system, what they feel that the character needs, what the film needs, what the actor needs. And I think through following these different processes, you learn so much and you build your foundation as an actor. And I think half the thrill of it for me is to ensure that each character is different from the other. And an easy way to ensure that that happens is to blindly follow the process that your director is subscribing and submit yourself to it. So my process on each film has honestly been quite different. And when you have a director like Nitish sir with you, you must blindly follow his lead. And
is it true, Nitish sir? Does she blindly follow your lead, or she
she's-
disagrees with most of what
She's
you
very
say?
modest to say that, but yes, I believe in doing a lot of prep, so there are a lot of discussions which happen. And yes, we love to agree that this is what exactly we are going to do on the day of the shoot, so that there are no surprises on the day of the shoot. Actor comes fully prepared, so yeah.
what I've found though is that, most people think that an actor's job is that of a medium to sort of visually depict the words of the writer, the instructions of the director. But I think it's so important to, and this has been my biggest learning in my very few years in the industry, you're not merely a translator, because the way that you interpret those words and the story is so individual to each actor, because you come with the baggage of your own experiences, your own conditioning, your own hopes, your own knowledge of the world. And so to expand your knowledge of the people of your country, of the stories that you want to tell, of the audience that you're speaking to, I think helps a lot.
All right. So good to have you with us. And, as an editor, you're obviously responsible for bringing the creator's vision to life and in the most elegant and in the most sometimes succinct or sometimes elaborate way that is necessary. I'm sure you would have, and maybe you can talk through a couple of examples of the approach. Times when you have felt the need to sort of iterate and innovate and build on a certain starting point, right? And how do you approach those conversations with the creators, with the writers, with the director? And, because you bring your own sensibility to the process as well. How does that work?
I think editing and filmmaking in general is very collaborative, so it doesn't really belong to one individual as a process. I would say that most of my experience, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of other editors as well, it works best when you're working with a director who's extremely secure and is extremely open to ideas. I think it sometimes works against the story if the director is very fixated on his or her way of telling the story and not particularly keen to collaborate. For instance, when you talk about innovation and finding solutions together, I can talk about actually so many various. I've just done a film for Amazon where on paper we had a certain kind of structure. I can't talk too much about it because it's unreleased. We had a certain kind of structure. The director was Vijay Maurya. And we have been able to play around a lot with the structure in edit. As also there was another show that I have done for Netflix. And the director there was actually very open and honest about the fact. He said, I can only think in long dialogues and monologues. So all my scripts are just one dialogue after another. But if you find an opportunity to intercut, because obviously that doesn't make for very good pacing, if you find opportunity to intercut, please do that in the edit. So it is kind of, I think you need to be given that kind of space to explore. And as I said, if a director is willing to give you that space, I think that's really a very, very interesting collaboration.
Nitish, this is for you. Across most of your projects, you've actually worn multiple hats, two of the most predominant hats being as a writer and a director as well. And my question to you, and actually a series of questions is, one, does one end up getting in the way of the other sometimes, right? And second, to the students here, students of, pursuing courses in direction and screenplay, is it necessary to hone one's skill at writing to be a really, really good director?
Okay, very tough question.
I came prepared.
Yeah. There are a lot of times when the director in me has given a lot of galis to the writer in me, because certain things we write as writers, once you go down to directing it, it suddenly looks like ki likh to diya tha bhi karenge kaise, So I find it easier to direct stuff written by other people, which mostly happens when I do ad films. My movies mostly I have written only, partly, along with my set of writers. So let me just give you an example, which is in Dangal, when we wrote the first draft, तो जो कॉमनवेल्थ के फाइट्स थे वो तब हमको रेसलिंग के बारे में कुछ ज़्यादा मालूम नहीं था. वी वर जस्ट राइटिंग द फर्स्ट ड्राफ्ट बेस्ड ऑन आवर इंट्रैक्शंस. सो वी न्यू कि दिस इज व्हाट द ग्राफ वी नीड टू कीप. क्वार्टर फाइनल राउंड 1 गीता लूजेस बैडली. क्वार्टर फाइनल राउंड 2 गीता विंस क्लोजली. राउंड 3 क्वार्टर फाइनल गीता विंस जस्ट इन द निक ऑफ टाइम. ये हमारा ड्राफ्ट था. एंड दिस इज something which we wrote for semi-final also and for the final also. And once you start directing it, you say, okay, how is she going to win closely round 1 or lose badly round 1, win closely round 2? So you have to start doing all that mehnat and you say, yeah, likhna bahut aasan tha, but when you get down to directing it, it's very difficult. But if you ask me that which is a more difficult process, I can tell you writing is a very, very difficult process. It's probably the toughest I have faced so far because it's all about creating something out of thin air. When you're directing, you already have a material on paper. You already have some visuals in your head. When you're writing, you have nothing. So to me, writing is very difficult.
And would you therefore say it's a good practice, or you would advise students to pursue, students who want to pursue a career in direction, do you think it's an important skill for them to hone their skill at writing as well?
Not necessarily, because I know a lot of very good directors who are not writers. So I think it's a completely different skill set. I never wanted to be a director. I'm an accidental director. I always wanted to be a writer. Direction fell in my lap. And I'm glad it did. No complaints. But I don't think you need to. But somewhere I think as a director, you need to have a basic understanding of how a story should flow, how characters should be developed, and how the basic journey and the arcs are done. And at least basic knowledge should be there, because when the director sits with the writer, director need not be a writer, but he should be able to guide the writer to his own vision. So that little understanding would be very important.
Understood. It's very interesting. Janhvi, this is to you. Just to simplify this, there are broadly, at the extremes, two categories of, actors. One who, like to rehearse a lot and stick to not just the spirit, but the letter of the script and manner of speaking. And then you have others who sort of are more prone to improvisation, right? So my question actually is not, what is your style? So feel free to, address it. But, and in Bawal, to take an example, right? The characters of Ajju and Nisha, and the situations that kind of escalate between them. How did you execute those, what can be called, moments of angst and frustration in the character of Nisha? Because you can prepare for the broad arc that Nisha's character will take, but is there a moment of spontaneity that is needed to be able to execute something like that really well? Because obviously, the character of Nisha that you portrayed has been getting a lot of fantastic reviews, and rightfully so. How does that process feel like? Is it more prep or is it more on set?
I think for me, what works specifically in Bawal with Nisha was a lot of prep, but not the kind of typical prep that one would imagine, which is to read the dialogue and rehearse the same scene over and over again. I think what that does for me personally is that, like you said, it takes away from the spontaneity of it. But I think what really helped me was discussions with Nitish sir and understanding things about Nisha that weren't even in the script. For example, how she grew up, what her life in school was like, if this was her first marriage proposal or her fifth, how that made her feel. And just knowing very specific details. Actually, the information that I got from that one scene that I did with Varun in the bar, where she speaks about her favorite writers and her favorite films, details like that, I think, tell you a lot about the character. And that's actually homework that I would do for any and every character, even if it wasn't a part of the scene, because it just makes that person very real. I think as actors, we have a very unique responsibility to give birth to a complete human being. And each human being is so specific in their baggage, their memories, their hopes, their desires. And no two people, even though they've been brought up, even perhaps in the same household, can ever have the same outlook on things. So I think the thing is to know your character as well as possible. And then even if you're not improvising dialogues or moments, sometimes in the middle of doing a scene, you might discover a feeling that feels very honest to who your character is. And even that can count as an improvisation, I think. Maybe a moment of silence, maybe fumbling on a word, maybe, Nawaz sir actually told me this and it really stuck with me. He said that the best acting always happens by mistake. And I think what he meant by that is when you know your character so well, that there's something in your muscle memory, there's something, वो character पूरी तरह से आप पे उतर जाता है, that you don't plan things and it just kind of happens. And I think with every character, that's what I aspire to be, that, I just know her so well that I can subconsciously make choices that the character would make.
Fantastic. Just to follow and kind of taking a bit of a detour, I'm sure as an actor, Janhvi, you have a vision for or an idea of what you would like your filmography to look like. I'm sure all the students of the craft, studying and preparing to become actors or any, technicians or writers, they have a certain vision of the kind of stories that they want to be a part of. So my question is, how has that trajectory been for you? Have you followed exactly what you wanted to? And the follow-up and to the students in the audience is, when do you know if you need to make a pivot from a path that you felt like you wanted to pursue, but you feel like, who you are, or, the stories that you want to kind of be a part of kind of evolve? And when do you know that you need to make a choice or change direction, really?
I don't know if this is specific to just my experience, but as an actor, I feel like nothing goes according to plan. Like you can have a bunch of things planned. You can have like इसके बाद ये film होगा, फिर ये होगा, फिर ये होगा, मेरे dates ऐसे है. Nothing ever goes according to plan. Like I had a vision a week ago of what my life was going to look like for the next couple of months, and it just keeps changing. And so I guess you just have to adapt. And from all of the interactions I've also had with other actors, they feel similarly. So I don't think this has anything to do with where you are in life, what position you are in as an actor. I think it just kind of, it's a professional hazard almost. Waiting is a big part of the job. And to address your second question, I think you asked me about when you feel like it's time to pivot.
Yeah.
That's funny you said that, because of late I've been feeling that a lot as an actor myself. I think that when you identify that as a performer you've developed crutches that you go to easily, that I know कि ये मैं अच्छे से कर सकती हूँ और ये जब करूँगी तो हर डायरेक्टर को अच्छा लगता है, तो ये आसानी से हो जाता है. And that's convenient, but you should identify that you're only impressing in a way yourself or the people in the moment. But as an actor, you need to keep pushing yourself, breaking those crutches, challenging yourself, going into uncharted territories. I think that for a while now, I've played slightly more vulnerable characters, perhaps even slightly back-footed characters, with a lot of sincerity but inner turmoil, relatively quieter characters. And I think that I've developed my go-to regiment to what someone like that would be like. And just for my sake and for what I feel like doing as an artist, I feel I want to go away from it and pivot and challenge myself soon, hopefully.
Interesting. I seem to have asked you this question at a very pertinent point.
You have. I feel quite existential about it, actually.
Nitish sir, to you, sir. Talking about your latest film, Bawal. It has a huge scale. Obviously, it's set across different countries, and it also has a arc that goes across different generations. And even in your previous films like Dangal and Chichore, they had this large scale. Can you take us through the creative process of how do you put together a team for such? I'm kind of getting to the logistics, if you may, of the process. How do you put together a team? What is the most critical thing to get right in the beginning? What can wait till a little later? And where does casting come in? And what are the absolute must get this right things in the beginning?
I think just to tell you the way I operate is that I had told Sajid sir for Bawal that even if I don't get one HOD of my choice, even if one HOD is missing, I'm not going to make this film. So it's that important, for everyone who I want should be there for me, because every department is so critical. So obviously you start by getting all the when you start doing all your you start by, who's going to be the cinematographer of the film, who's going to be the production designer, who's going to be the costume stylist, who's going to be the editor. I start worrying about the editor even before you have started shooting, because having worked with Charu now, I understand the importance of having inputs from the editor also at the pre-stage, and not saying ki ye rahe rushes ab edit kar lo. It's like not that. There are a lot of valuable inputs which you get from your editor even before you've gone on floor. He will sit with me in my short breakdowns and help me and say ki maybe if you shoot something like that, it will help me in cutting it better. So these and so much more. The music director, the first AD, is so critical. Who's your DA? Somebody who can always creatively challenge you. So I worry a lot about all the HODs, and it actually depends, from one project to the other. Like for Dangal, I needed a particular set of HODs. For Chichore, the requirement was different, and for Bawal, the requirement was very different. So you choose your HODs depending on what your perception and their strengths are and what is required from this particular film, and then you hope that they will agree to work with you. That's the only thing, not everybody agrees. Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if somebody didn't agree to work.
No, I've heard more no's than yeses in my career.
But do you have early on in the process do you have actors in mind as you're polishing out, finishing out the writing, working with your team of writers? At what stage does that come into the picture?
When we finish the draft, it's a rule which me and my writers normally follow, that we will not keep any actor in mind, because what happens is all of us have certain perceptions about the actors. कि ये वाला role अच्छा करता है, ये ऐसा अच्छा करता है, ये रोता बहुत अच्छा है, ये action बहुत अच्छा है. You have those perceptions about you, and once you keep an actor in mind, you will start writing to his strengths and start avoiding what you perceive are his weaknesses. You will never get any surprise. And if you see, our cinema has suffered because of that, because you keep on seeing that actor doing the same thing because the roles were written for that particular actor, and oh, this guy does this very well, so let us make him do that again in the film. So when we wrote Dangal, Amir sir was never there in our head. It's only after we finished writing Dangal, and when Ronnie and Sid asked us that, okay, let's keep the realities aside, who do you think you would want to play Mahavir Singh Phogat? And we were ready with the answer कि ये तो question आने वाला है, because screen पे तो अच्छा लिखा था हम लोगों ने. So without pause, I said Amir sir, and he said, yeah, good choice. Let's hope he works. So that's how it was. Sushant and Shraddha were never in our head. When we wrote Chichore, Varun and Janhvi came only after we finished writing Bawal. It's the same. Only in Bhootnath Returns I knew I was writing for Amitabh Bachchan because it was a sequel. So that's how it is. Yeah.
That's very interesting. But once the scripting is sort of, the first draft is more or less there, and you have a version of what the casting will look like, and then you go into shoot, and then you get it to sort of editing it out. How much, in your experience, does the finished product really end up? How different is it versus the seed of the idea that you originally had, right? Are there examples where it has been significantly different in where it ended up at?
No, it's always significantly different. If it is not, then maybe somewhere I'm failing as a director, because I have got into a tunnel vision as a writer, and I've only managed to deliver that. So I personally put a lot of stress on myself. I make a lot of effort in kind of lifting the vision which I had as a writer, along with my set of writers, to deliver and give them something which is cinematically much better than what their expectations was. And the first people who watch my rough cut are my writers, because they are the most blunt to me. They can just rip apart what you've created. And sometimes they come up with very, very valuable suggestions also. So like, it has to be, it should be, by all means, even it should surprise you also when your editor puts the scene together and you say, this is what I had thought while writing, but what I'm seeing is much more beautiful. Because there is so much more which you start seeing physically, the production design, the costumes, the actors, their faces, the performances, which are completely missing on paper. So it has to go 2 notches up.
You belong to a generation, and all of us currently live in a generation where there is social media and what it creates as a certain version of there is the id, ego, and superego in the old construct. And how do you maintain objectivity in such a situation? Because what can sometimes be alluring is, pursue what is popular, pursue versus what you truly want to, versus what you are really popular for, what you are famous for. How do you make sure that your assessment of what you want to chart as a course is true to your own self?
I think an observation that I've had is that the things that have become extremely popular, especially with films, have never been a replication of something else or of another success story. So films that garnered, the most amount of love, or performances that got a lot of love and recognition, have never been a template or have usually more often than not had a reference point. I mean, just speaking purely of Nitesh sir's filmography, Chichore I don't think had a reference point at all. Neither did Dangal. And I think the way that that resonated with people was historic. And I don't think the agenda was ever to follow a template. So what I've observed is that more often than not, when you try to follow a template or try to follow a popular trend, आपकी नियत ही गलत है. So how will it land? How will it? I think what resonates the most with people is original ideas told with conviction, told with honesty, and to hear stories from people that actually have a take on things. Otherwise, everyone's just trying to replicate templates, even in performances, even in stories, even in like stupid social media posts. Like ये reel में ज़्यादा views मिले तो हम भी नाचेंगे पेड़ के नीचे या बारिश में नाचूंगी. Like it's, I don't know. I feel it's very important to maintain a certain amount of your personality, what feels organic to you, and protect yourself from the noise, because otherwise you'll never be able to be objective, I think.
What, in your opinion, Vikramji, will be, you know, we are inherently a culture of stories and storytellers. It is ingrained in, you know, how we all grow up and, you know, mythologies. What do you think is the one thing that will accelerate our impact on the global stage as a source of great stories and storytelling? And, you know, what can students therefore take as that inspiration to really, you know, for Indian stories to find a global stage consistently?
I think what Janhvi mentioned was very, very important, that we have so much of stories within our country, that we must go for our own stories, our own experience, which we can share with the entire world. I mean, take the example of Panchayat. It is a story of a village, but that story resonates across the country. And so beautifully it has been. It's an original story. Similarly, there would be several other stories in some part of the country, whether it is in, it could be in Guwahati, it could be in Patna, it could be in so many places, which we are not aware of. And those stories, interesting stories about people, about culture, which can then be woven into a beautiful web series or a film, and the world will watch it. We see a lot of web series or films of Korea. It was made essentially for Korea. When Squid Games came, when Money Heist came, it was never meant to be sent internationally. It was meant only for that country. It was through an experiment that it took it to other countries. Because of technology, you can dub it and you can subtitle it in various languages, but that created waves. So the type of diversity which we have in this country, if we are able to pick up those stories, rather than ape some movie which has been made in Hollywood, and we try to adapt it and make it, it's better we give those original stories to the world, and we would be there.
Antara, this is a question to you. How do you think opportunities have changed, or have they? And I might be presumptuous in how I framed that question. And if they have, how have opportunities changed for technicians who, you know, with the advent of streaming, right? Has it become a larger canvas, or has the nature of the skill to be developed, or has the expertise sought also gone through some evolution, in a manner of speaking? And just segueing from that into, you know, what you foresee the future of entertainment to be, what would your advice be for the audience?
So definitely, yes, the opportunities have really opened up with the advent of streaming, which is good and bad because, of course, there's a lot of employment, there's a lot of scope for employment, but that also the flip side to that is that a lot of people who are underskilled would also be getting jobs that they're probably not primed for. And this is within our film industry. You will find people earlier when we were, this is even before we were in the film industry, they were very highly skilled. For instance, negative cutters, very highly skilled at their jobs. Not everyone can do that job. Or anyone, even I would say light boys or focus pullers. Very specific job profile, and they're people who had trained extensively. I would say that one finds a lot more people around now who are not as well trained or do not have enough a number of years under their belt of training. A lot of people who are, for instance, in editing itself, becoming editors like a year into just assisting. And I'm a very firm believer in people assisting directors or, editors or whatever it is. And which is good and bad. It's great for that person, but I feel it may not necessarily translate into longevity of that person's career graph and doesn't necessarily translate into very good filmmaking. This is my personal opinion, and of course there have been exceptions to the case, but I do feel that that is one pitfall definitely.
Has streaming changed not just the diversity of opportunities that are available for you as an actor, but also what it requires of you as an actor? And how do you see that sort of shaping up?
I think, yeah, as a consequence it has, because what it has directly impacted really is exposing our audiences to content from around the world. And I think they are now exposed to different calibers of content. And there's such an abundance of content that all of a sudden they refuse to settle for average or anything even close to average. So their standards are extremely high, which I think is a great thing because it inspires us to push to the levels of some of the cinema and content that we're seeing ourselves from around the world. I think lines have been blurred. Language is no longer a barrier. I think it inspires us to make global films, like you said, inclusive films. And I think it's a very exciting time. And I think what this has done for us as actors is it's also given us a lot of opportunity to play the kind of characters that maybe at a certain point would have felt alienating to a larger audience. Because now with platforms like Amazon, there is a large audience for unconventional, per se, kind of roles and stories. And I think that's very liberating and encouraging for people in our industry. It's also, on a more basic and logical level, created a lot more opportunity for jobs, for employment, because there's suddenly an influx of content that's being created. There's so many platforms for it to go on. And yeah, it's a very exciting time, I think.
You've heard obviously Nitish ji and Janhvi and Antara talk about how their graphs have evolved. And when you look at the students of the FTII and other institutes across the country, what are the opportunities broadly? How have you seen the opportunities change for young budding storytellers in the country? And what would you say are the best ways to leverage those opportunities, whether it be in movies, in streaming, and in other forms of entertainment?
At the outset, let me say that this is my first masterclass lesson for me. I've never had it. You have a lot of masterclass in IFI, but I could never had the opportunity to go through it and sit through it. And this is my first one, and thanks to Amazon and thanks to all of you. And it was, of course, very educative for all of you, but it was extremely educative for me. And the final conclusion which I reach is that I am so good that I am only a bureaucrat. I could never have had, there's no way I, as a person, could have had so much of talent to go through the type of brilliance which these people are coming up, and the type of brilliance which will come from all of you in times to come. So I'm quite happy where I am. For you, the opportunities are immense, because this OTT platform opens such a huge opportunity. Now everybody doesn't have to go to Bombay or to Chennai or to Calcutta to make a movie. You can make it anywhere. And when you see web series and films like Panchayat, or if you see a movie like Kala, or if you see Jubilee, I don't know how many have watched it, you will be amazed at the talent, young talent which people have, and the opportunity they got on an OTT platform. That would not have been possible because the numbers which come out for theatrical release is very, very limited, as against the numbers which can possibly come out on OTT platforms. And OTT platforms are not 5 or 10, they are 60 in this country, including in vernaculars, including in Marathi, some in Punjabi, some in Malayalam, several languages. So for you, the opportunities are immense. And I see all of you would go places in terms of what she mentioned, that good use of technology, but the type of opportunity which you get on these streaming platforms, and many more technology will offer those platforms. So it's a really great, encouraging world for you in future.
Thank you so much, Vikramji. Thank you, Janhvi. Thank you, Nitish sir.
Thank you so
Antara.
much. Thank you
Thank
guys
you so
for
much.
coming
Thank
up.
you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.